All right. Well, hey, welcome back to the second edition of the Owens Recovery Science podcast this year in 2024. Um, I hope that you had time to listen to the Johnny Yellett podcast. That was episode one, if you will, for this year. That interview was very impactful, just to kind of sit in the background and listen to Johnny's history and how he came to be where he is now, and hear about his injuries and his fallen brothers and all of that. And just really almost just a very motivating guy to listen to. And it's somebody that I hope we get to facilitate having speak at some point in some of the events that we sponsor. I'm going to actively, I already told him I'm going to actively be trying to make that happen. So I think we can. On this episode, our buddy Zac Dunkle interviews Cameron Dunbar. Cameron is a Marine corporal, retired. He is a current student at Regis University in Denver, Colorado, within their physical therapy program. We got to know Cameron. Zac and I did through a friend of ours, TJ Hovel, who's also out in the Denver area, a guy we've known for quite a while, just a real solid dude. And he connected us up with Cameron on a few different things related to physical therapy. So really glad we got to know Cameron. And it was kind of a timely fashion because Zac said, we got to talk about having Cameron come on the Memorial Day podcast. Like, I think he might be a good one to have come on there. And boy, was he right. Cameron was born and raised in Castle Rock, Colorado, which is just, you'll hear him talk about it. It was just south of Denver. And in 2009, he went right into the Marine Corps at age 17, right out of high school. That took him to boot camp in San Diego, California, where he left as an 03 contract infantryman. From there, he attended infantry school at Camp Pendleton, where he attained machine gunner specialty 0331 or 0331. They have a certain way of saying that, y'all. I don't. That only like military people do it right. So I'm sure I butchered that. So apologies, Cameron. I tried to get it right, man. Leading into, sort of after he received that designation, 0331, that led to his attachment to the 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, aka the Dark Horses. Within the Dark Horse Battalion, he was part of Kilo Company. Kilo Company and the rest of the Dark Horse Battalion were deployed to Afghanistan's Helmand province from 2010 to 2011, during which they suffered catastrophic loss of life, the greatest of any Marine unit in Afghanistan to this day. Following that deployment, Corporal Dunbar deployed a second time as part of a Marine expeditionary unit within the Navy. After serving 5 years, Corporal Dunbar retired and attended Metro State University in Denver, where he received a bachelor's degree in exercise science. His interest in physical therapy grew out of his time in Afghanistan, where he saw firsthand how he helped the people under the thrall of the Taliban. Witnessing this, along with suffering some injuries himself that required the skill of a physical therapist, really inspired him to pursue a career that would allow him to similarly help people. Upon completion of his DPT, Dr. Dunbar plans to work in a setting that cares for military veterans so he can continue to be part of the community. Cameron has a passion to be active in the veteran community because of his own experience of feeling isolated when he got out. He hopes in his role as a PT that he can connect with the other veterans to prevent and or help them manage the sense of isolation that he experienced, and he knows that they will too. Lastly, he tells us he's come on the podcast to share his story as a way to encourage other vets to talk about their experiences instead of just keeping them all bottled up inside. And he definitely did that. This has turned out to be a really great podcast, and I'm sure all of you guys will enjoy hearing Cameron's experience. And so now I'll just turn it right over to our man, Zac Dunkle. This is the Owens Recovery Science Podcast.
All right. Hey, Cameron, how's it going, man?
Pretty good, man. How are you?
Dude, can't complain. Can't complain. Just freaking trucking along, staying busy with things on my end, and yeah, getting ready to roll into Memorial Day. It's always it's a weird holiday for those that are impacted by it.
Mhm.
You know, so, but yeah, so what about yourself? How are things going?
Good. Just started my summer semester for PT school, so been busy doing a bunch of school work, but it's going good.
Good, good. Now, what year are you in?
I'm in my first year,
Okay,
third
at
semester.
Regis.
Yep.
Okay. Um, what do you have any idea, any direction in which you want to go?
Yeah, so I do want to work with military and veterans once I get out, either with the VA or wherever I end up landing.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, there's definitely a strong population and a strong need for people with to deal with the orthopedic side of things after the 20 years in Afghanistan and still kind of kicking rocks around in Iraq and Syria and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then I think the other thing too, man, is I know whenever I have the opportunity to work with veterans and whatnot, it's always a special time because there's a different sort of connection that
Yeah.
you have, especially with veterans from the GWAT. It's kind of crazy because you may not have chewed the same dirt, but you kind of chewed the same dirt.
Right.
Um, so, but for everyone who's listening, man, why don't you ju- tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of where you came from, and very, very general, kind of where you came from, where you got to where you are, type of a deal.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Colorado. Um, I
Whereabouts in Colorado?
Castle Rock, Colorado.
Where's
So
that at?
south of Denver.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like in between Denver and Colorado Springs.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, all right. About all I know from Colorado is the little bit of elk hunting I've done out
Oh
there.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty unsuccessful, but we'll see.
Right. Tough. Tough out
Hey,
there.
yeah, it was quite a trip. I'm the guy who it's always interesting, coming out of the Marine Corps and stuff, and how the Marine Corps is always about like be prepared, plenty of
Mhm.
water, all this type of stuff. Well, I got to this hunting area and I had been in Montana the year before and there was plenty of water, right? So I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, I'm not packing water in. I'll just get water in the unit. And yeah, 2 days later I had no water. So I was like, dude, this is not good. So then I had to drive back into town, and that was, oh man, it was like a 2 hour drive. I was about 20 miles, I think, off a blacktop road is where I was at. So
Yeah.
yeah, it took me. It was like 2 hours to go back into town just to get a couple gallons of water. But anyway, so grew up in Colorado.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then kind of growing up wise, did you have any idea of what you wanted to do?
Not really. I mean, I grew up watching what was going on in Iraq and Afghanistan on the news and remembered 9/11 very well. So it was definitely in the back of my mind that I wanted to, go get a piece of revenge and go out there and do what I can to serve my country. And so that's kind of what ended up happening after I got out of high school, joined when I was 17.
Now, what time period are we talking?
Oh yeah,
Uh,
so it was around 2009 when
Okay,
I joined up. Um, so I was born in 91. So I think I was in
yeah.
fifth grade when 9/11 happened. And so yeah, joined when I was 17, 18, and went to boot camp right away.
On the West Coast,
Yeah, West Coast. So I was
where
in San
they don't really make Marines out there.
Diego.
Yeah, you guys go to Padres games, right? Yeah, Padres games. And
Up the
I see
mountain.
these memes all, and it's like, they're doing PT, not for the people listening, not physical therapy, physical training is what they call it. And there's like an airplane in the background because the airport is right beside
Yeah.
the recruit depot. And then
Dude,
it's
that
got
was
one of the
torture.
recruits that's like, please take me with you.
Yeah. Every day I'm like, man, one day
Yeah,
I'll be
yeah,
in that
yeah, yeah,
plane.
yeah. Yeah. All right, man. So you went to San Diego, Recruit Depot. Now, when you enlisted, did you were did you have in your mind like, dude, I want to be a grunt. I want to
Yeah.
be an O3. I want to go basically go get some.
Yep. So my
Yeah.
recruiter was like, "Are you sure you want to do infantry? Like we have all these other motor T, all these other contracts." I'm like, "No, man, I want to do infantry. I'm not leaving unless you give me an infantry contract." Because I
Yeah.
was told, how they try and mess with you a little bit and put you open
Yeah.
contract when you go into boot camp, and then you end up, cleaning toilets or something like that.
Yeah,
So
it's crazy, right? Like you're the recruiter's dream. You're
right,
like, I don't even have to sell this kid. This kid just wants to be in the infantry. You're
right,
like, yeah, dude, that's exactly how it was. In fact, I told my recruiter. In fact, I don't even think my recruiter recruited me. I literally told him I was going to the Marine Corps, and he never talked to me. Whatever. I basically, as soon as I could enlist, I enlisted. And again, like I was an O3, dude, that's all I wanted to do was
yep,
be an O3. And it's crazy because I think like people like civilians and whatnot, when they think about the Marine Corps, they think like everybody's O3s. And I'm like,
right.
no, they're not.
No,
Like there's regular jobs out there, and then there's the people who get it done. So
right.
yeah, man. So you went in '03, and then boot camp in San Diego.
Hmm.
From boot camp, go to SOI,
Yep.
School of Infantry. When you're at the School of Infantry, from there you kind of make a decision of what type of infantry marine you want to be.
Hmm.
So just for everyone listening, kind of the way that it breaks down is you have what's called an 0311. That's like your ground pounder, the guy who's like M16 just toting and doing that. And then you go to an 0331, which is your machine gunners. And then you have mortarmen, and then javelin guys are their own MOS as well. So what did you decide?
I chose machine gunner. Oh, three.
Yeah. So
It was,
what excited you about being a machine gunner?
I, for the longest time, like they give you like 2 weeks or so, or a week or so to select what you want to be.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, nah, that sounds like too much work. I'm just gonna be an 11. And then I remember seeing like some of the guys that had already committed, um, carrying one of the machine guns. And it was like the last day. And I went up to my sergeant and I was like, no, I want to be a machine gunner. And so
Yeah.
it just looked too badass not to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it looks badass until you start carrying the 50 cal around
Yeah.
on a hump.
Or
And
the Mark
then
19.
it's yeah, or the Mark 19, and you're like, you know what, man? Yeah, maybe this isn't so badass anymore. But I will tell you, man, is when the 50 cal lights something up, that's a savior right there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, man, it's absolutely crazy. So, kind of going along, so you go through SOI, roughly like 8 weeks of infantry style training, and then from there you get assigned a unit.
Mhm.
And where did you go from SOI?
3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. So it was just next door to SOI. So it wasn't a
Yeah.
too far of a jaunt for me.
Oh, out in Pendleton.
Yeah, yeah, in Pendleton.
So, just to kind of spin everybody up, like the military in general uses a lot of jargon, and the Marine Corps, the way they break their units down is in general, all the if you see something with an even number, it's all on the East Coast. If you see something with an odd number, predominantly it's going to be West Coast. So, like, you basically have three divisions within the Marine Corps, active duty wise. First Marine Division is what you were part of. That's
Mhm.
out in Pendleton. It's out in
Mhm.
California. Second Marine Division is where I was at, out in Lejeune in North Carolina, and then Third Marine Division is out in Okie. And then as we just, without getting into the weeds, breaking things down, your division then is made up of regiments. You ultimately will have 3 battalions within a regiment. From there, this is strictly now for the infantry. You have 3 rifle companies within a battalion. Each of those rifle companies are going to have roughly 132 men, 130 men. Within your companies, you will have, within those rifle companies, you have 3 platoons. Each platoon is made up of 44 men. The platoons then are made up of 3 squads of roughly 13 men, and then the squads are made up of fire teams. So it's the reason why I kind of lay all that out is that is really important to the structure of how the Marine Corps fights. Um, like you, right, Cameron, you
Mhm.
were, so you go to 3-5, but like
Mhm.
like you don't even hang out really, quote unquote, with the company. Like a lot of your training and whatnot is strictly, it's within a platoon, right? Like that's kind of how it's broken down.
Yeah.
And then even more specifically, like you have fire teams, or for machine gunners, it would be fire teams that you support, and whatnot. But all right, so you graduate SOI,
Mhm.
you go to 3-5, and
Mhm.
then what's kind of going on at 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines at this point in time?
So we were getting ready to go to Afghanistan. I believe when I first got there, it wasn't going to be anything too crazy. And then, like, 2 months in, we got told we were going to go to Sangin in the Helmand province.
Where, so that was one of the things, that I wanted to ask. When they were prepping for your deployment, where did they tell you you were going to go? Was it always to like Helmand, and then all of a sudden it was Helmand, but then Sangin? What was the original plan for you guys?
Um, I don't really remember when I first got there what we were saying because it was kind of a whirlwind. But
Yeah,
I remember when we were like on our last training op, that's when it got switched to Helmand province, and then we got told it was going to be like we were going to be in the shit, and
yeah,
then we didn't really know. Well, I didn't really know we were going to be in Sangin until we got to Afghanistan, and then they told us we were going to go to Sangin. And I remember all the guys in Leatherneck like, "Oh, you're going there?
yeah.
I'm sorry."
Yeah, so you know, I think it's interesting to talk about the mindset that you had, right? Kind of going in, right? Because
Yeah.
the Marine Corps attracts a unique individual. And I would say by and large, they attract an individual who wants to get in the shit. Like, that's just like that's what the Marine Corps is kind of known for. Like, if there's going to be a fight, there's going to be Marines involved. And you take someone like yourself who's like, dude, I want to go get some. I want to take a bite. Um, and this is what I want to do. I want to be a grunt. I want to be an O3. And now, it's looking like it's going to happen maybe sooner than to be expected. Um, with that, with 3-5 at that point, do you remember, because you're really in the midst. I mean, we were pretty much like almost 8 to 9 years into Afghanistan at this
Yeah.
point.
Yep.
What was the kind of the culture, if you will? How many were what we would refer to as boots, the new
Mhm.
guys?
Mhm.
How many boots did you have versus how many seasoned, guys who had been on numerous tours? Do you remember?
Yeah. So we had my class who were all boots. And
Did
then,
they take your basically your class then? So like they're like fresh crop of SOIs going to the next Victor unit,
yeah.
pretty much.
So like
So
throughout the workup, we would get drops from SOI, and I was the last drop to my
yeah,
unit
got it.
from that workup.
Yep.
And then our seniors, our direct seniors, hadn't been to combat. Their first deployment was on a MEU, a
Got it.
Marine Expeditionary Unit.
Yep.
And then their seniors were from Iraq. And
Which
um,
turns out to be completely different
oh
battlefield.
yeah,
I mean, and we can get into that. We can talk about your experience and then, some of the stuff I've experienced, but completely different battlefield.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then we had gotten a few new sergeants from the time I was there, and I was only there like 6 months before we deployed. So it was a pretty quick turnaround from when I got there. That were pretty well versed in combat. Like one of them, he was one of my machine gun squad's section leaders or squad leaders. I mean, he had been in 5 different combat deployments, and they had all been heavily like kinetic, heavily
Mhm.
combat oriented. And so he was kind of bad luck in that way. Like he'd been on all the bad deployments.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was nice to have his experience with us, but yeah, I mean, for the majority, it was boots,
Yeah.
people who hadn't seen combat, and then us who hadn't even been at SOI for 2 months.
Now your the leadership, your platoon commanders and stuff, relatively fresh as well. Do you
Um,
remember?
no, they were. That was the thing. Like our whole chain of command beyond like my level and the next level up, we're
Yeah.
all very experienced. Like between like my first deployment and my second deployment, the leadership was completely different. Like my second deployment, I wouldn't have trusted any of the leadership
Yeah.
in the deployment that I was in before. So it was really nice. Like from platoon commanders down, I mean, we had the new lieutenants, but they were still like pretty good too.
Yeah.
So it was they all seemed very, very well versed in combat.
Yeah. So the kind of workup you kind of finish off the workup with
Mhm.
3-5, and then correct me if I'm wrong here. You guys are deploying basically end of summer into September-ish.
Yeah,
Probably leaving what, August, end of August, beginning of September,
I think so. That sounds about right. Yeah.
because that your rotation in 2010, 2011
Mhm.
was pretty much the rotation that I did in 2004. So I think we left like right after Labor Day and then came back sometime middle of April. That's like seven
Yeah,
month
that sounds
rotation
the
deal.
same.
So you all go over to Afghanistan. You're at Camp Leatherneck, and basically you're talking with folks, and they're basically like, "Well, you're going to Sangin. Good
Yeah.
luck."
Well, and
So
I wanted to kind of speak to the whole getting us in the mindset.
yeah,
It did do that. Like I remember in SOI, all of the sergeants sat us down and like look to the left and the right of you. Like you might not see these guys. Like they might not be here by the time you get out. And then when we were going on pre-deployment leave, they told us, go home, don't do or do stupid things, spend your money because you're not coming back. Like they told us like to get ready for it. You're not coming back.
yeah, it was. So the other thing too that coincides with when your deployment was going on, this was the midst of the troop surge.
Yeah.
This was I don't know if you were quote unquote like part of like it. I don't know if you were directly part of the troop surge or your unit like 3-5 was scheduled to go and deploy anyway, and it just coincided with that. But that was what was going on at this point in time in history. Was the battle in Afghanistan was kind of at a stalemate,
Mhm.
and we needed to tip it a little bit into our favor. And to tip it was we needed to send a surge of troops. We sent, I think it was upwards. We had when you went over there, if I'm not mistaken, it was over 100,000
Oh,
um,
wow.
coalition forces in country, not just Marine, like just every
Right.
like coalition wise, we had over 100,000, and so it's always a bit of a it just messes with your mind when someone tells you don't plan on in so many words don't plan on coming back.
Yeah.
um
Honestly, I feel like it got me prepared.
yeah,
It might have messed with me a little bit, but it was what I needed to hear
yeah,
in order to be okay when I got there.
yeah, it definitely, I think there's moments like that that you look back on, and it's just it, it really helps to channel the focus,
Yeah.
um, because you you look at things so differently, um, and it doesn't even have to be life or death, but you always have that context in your mind of detail, um, and I really think that that's one of the things that the Marine Corps does is as much as like people in the Marine Corps hate it, especially like the O3s, like the attention to detail and stuff. I mean, that's what they try to teach out of that is literally it's the attention to detail to see things that aren't necessarily right, that but aren't really apparent. Um, and you'll probably get into some of that here, but it's that mindset of getting you ready to go.
Yeah.
um so when you head over,
Mhm.
um and eh, when you're in Afghanistan, basically how long is it then before when you go from Camp Leatherneck to
Mhm.
basically like the fob or like Sangin, go into that area where you're pretty detached.
Yeah. It was about, I think for me, because I think I was one of the last squads to leave Leatherneck. So it was 2 weeks, if
Yeah.
that, we were in Leatherneck. So it was a quick turnaround.
So when you're there, what are you hearing reports, or is it just kind of like you're just buying your time? You're like, dude, let's go, let's get it, let's go. We're here. It's time to go. Let's go right now. Or is it like, hey man, like, you know, first squad or like first platoon, dude, we got 3 guys are out already. Like,
Yeah.
what did you hear while you're just waiting to go?
So for the most part, we didn't hear much of anything. Our sergeants did, but they didn't tell us anything.
Yeah,
They were kind of still, you know, doing the whole messing with us thing to get us, to get our heads clear of anything else but what they wanted us to do at that moment in time. So yeah, we didn't really know a lot of anything until we got there.
yeah. What I want to do before we go any further is give the layout of Sangin a little, like just
Yeah.
the layout of that area. Um, Basically in Helmand province. Not necessarily a super big area either.
Mhm.
From when I pulled it up, you're looking at basically right around like maybe 9 miles long and 3 miles wide, something like that.
Yeah.
And it sits on the northeast portion of Helmand, and then it's bordered on the west side by the Helmand River, right?
Mhm.
And that plays somewhat of a strategic role into what's going on in this area. because where you have the Helmand River, you have the green zone. And it's really crazy because Iraq was very similar to this. The areas around the Euphrates were very fertile. And that's exactly what's going on, right? Where you guys ended up going in Sangin. That was portions of Sangin right next to the Helmand River, very fertile, right? A lot of,
Yep.
what would you say, like tons of crops?
Yep. Cornfields and opium fields.
And opium, right? So
Yep.
this is probably what most people, when they hear about Helmand, this is what they think about. It's opium. One of the interesting stats about this, 80% of the global heroin supply is driven out of the opium plants or the poppy plants in Afghanistan. And then this ultimately goes to why Sangin was more than likely was a hard fight, is because the opium fields. So they were getting and interesting enough, Cameron, I pulled this from the book 1 Million Steps.
Oh yeah.
You told me about that Sunday. I burned through
Yeah.
that son of
Yeah.
a bitch in a day and a half.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously. I'm not on here fucking around. That's
That's a
what we
big
do.
book too.
That's what we do. That's what Marines do. We're dedicated to the job. I'm working a damn full-time job,
That's
and
awesome.
I burned through that book in a day and a half. So, but anyway, back to kind of Helmand, what was going on. So these farmers, these poppy fields and whatnot, dude, they're getting $200 per kilogram of raw opium. And you translate that to what you would get out of maybe a field. So 100 meter by 100 meter field, they're harvesting 400 pounds of raw opium, and that's going to net these farmers $3,600, right? That's 4 times what they're getting with wheat, for example, like in equal field size field of wheat, they're getting 4 times more for that for opium. And so now and the other main thing, and why like the US was like going after the opium in the poppy fields, was funding the Taliban. And so the thought process, can we choke the Taliban financially off by going after the poppy fields? And so, but yeah, man, so kind of that general layout. So you're sitting in Camp Leatherneck, you're one of the last squads to go out. And then when you finally head out to Sangin, what what's going on at this point? Because there was a British unit already there.
Yeah. Well, so the British unit had gotten replaced by 3-7.
Yeah.
They were on the tail end of their deployment, and they got told they had to go replace the British.
Yeah, the
And
British weren't doing shit.
nope, their
No,
ROVs didn't let them do
the
anything.
Brits just let the Taliban control that whole area.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they couldn't leave I think it like 30 meters outside the wire before
Yep.
they
Yep.
started getting into it.
Yeah.
And so when we got there, we kind of met with 3-7 and their small unit. It wasn't even like their full battalion. I think it was just one company, and they were pretty run down. They were ready to get out of there. So like we were supposed to do a transition where they'll take some of us on patrol, and then to get a lay of the land, and then we slowly take over with a little bit of them, and that didn't happen. So I think we did one patrol with them, and they had lost a guy he got hit by an IED on that patrol, and he survived, I think, but they were like, yeah, we're done. We're not going out anymore.
Yeah. And you know, when I was reading the book, it was interesting because the IEDs in Sangin were literally completely different than the IEDs in Iraq.
Really?
Um, right. Um, the IEDs in Iraq were command detonated.
Hmm.
So they would very similar setup of they would have your plastic explosive with an accelerant, some sort of fuel, with a blasting cap. And then what would happen is they would then run wires out of that and then connect the wire to either a two-way Motorola
Hmm.
or a cell phone, and then they would just call the cell phone, and then or like click the two-way Motorola and set off the IED. Versus what you guys dealt with was a little different, right?
Yeah. So they were dug into the ground, connected to pressure plates,
Yep.
all sorts of
And
different.
real makeshift, not
Oh yeah.
these are not like military grade, like what people think of pressure plates, what you see on TV in Vietnam type stuff. These things were like rudimentary,
Mhm.
literally like pieces of wood separated by like a piece of sponge or something, right? Like just,
Right.
and then as soon as you would step on it, and it was when you stepped on it, it was when it detonated, right?
Yep. They did
Yeah.
have some of those remote detonators too, but those were much more rare than the pressure
Yeah.
plates or tripwires. They had those too.
Yeah. So you do like kind of the left seat, right seat one time,
Yeah.
and then 3-7's like, no, dude, we're done, man.
Yeah.
Like it's on you guys at this point.
Yeah.
So um when you start, um kind of, if you will, what does it look like? Whether like day one patrols, like what would how did you guys start to kind of engage and win the area?
So we went out. My platoon was in a separate base than the main fob that we had.
Okay.
And so it was our little patrol base. And the first day we went out as a platoon, the entire platoon, and we were going to set a precedence for our time there and make sure that they knew that we weren't messing around. So we went out. Um, it was an all day thing. I think we even stayed overnight at a random house, and I just remember walking through a cornfield, and then all of a sudden I hear like this really loud, what sounded like popcorn
Mm-hmm.
popping, and we were in a cornfield, so I couldn't really see anything. And my team leader was in front of me, and he gets all bug-eyed, looks at me, and drops like a brick to the ground, just to get in the prone because we were getting shot at. And I didn't know it was going to sound like that. So I didn't know
Yeah.
what it was. And so he's like, get down. So I got down, and then I couldn't see anything. And so while we were there, because of the IEDs, we had to patrol in a straight line.
Yeah.
So we get taught all these different formations, and we just threw that out the window because we had to have a guy in the front who would sweep the IEDs. So
With
we could,
a metal detector.
yep, with a metal
Yep.
detector. And so I got down in the prone, looked to my right, and they kept shooting over our heads. And I look over at my team leader. He looks over at me. He's like, "Well, shoot," because I mean I couldn't see anything, so I wasn't gonna shoot. So I'm
Right,
like,
right,
"Okay."
right.
So I just start shooting, and then it just kept going back and forth that day. Um, and the thing about it was like we almost never really saw them. Like they were so
Yeah.
far away, unless like certain situations, but yeah, so we never really saw well, at least I never saw him from where we were when we got shot at. It was just out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So
And then so so from there, how far into the patrol would you say you were? From the patrol base, into, because they had an area that they straight up controlled, correct?
yeah,
Yeah,
all of
and
them.
and and they flew their flags quite proudly.
Yeah,
Yeah, like they threw it up there. You had your patrol base, and the
yeah,
Taliban has their patrol base.
yeah,
Yeah. How far were you from your patrol base?
It was about maybe 100 meters.
Yeah,
Like
not far at all,
barely,
man.
yeah, barely
Yeah.
just left.
Yep. Um, Now l- let me ask you, just to kind of set the stage of the battlefield for people who aren't really familiar with the dynamics of how that works, because you're not on just a battlefield, right? Like you said, you're in a
Right.
cornfield.
Yeah.
There's civilians around, or quote unquote people
Yeah.
who are non-combatants. They claim to be non-combatants, right?
Yep.
But they have an allegiance to one side.
Yeah.
Um,
Because they're forced to.
right. So, and uh, we could get it. That's a whole other podcast of what has happened over the last 2.5 years as to why they had that allegiance way back then. But either
Yeah.
way, so um, you're 100 meters from your patrol base, and now you're already taking fire.
Yeah.
What now is the plan from here? Because you got a whole bunch of new guys,
Yeah.
and you know, what do you guys decide to do? Do you start basically initiating an IA drill, like immediate action type drill,
Yeah.
kind of to go, or is it like, no, we're only 100 meters from the base, we need to pull back, reassess this, and kind of reattack? What was the plan?
Oh no, it was to bring the fight to them.
Bring the
So
fight.
yeah, we maneuvered out of the cornfield and
By maneuver, did you like send flanking elements like to the side to basically try to envelop them, and
yeah,
and then and have your other assault element go forward?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then we moved out of there. And then it stopped. So we were able to move a little bit more because they were like, oh, they're not just gonna run away. They're here.
Yeah.
And so we made our way to a couple different buildings and we were kind of taking a break. And then we started getting into contact. This was a little bit closer. Um, I think they were. I know I just said we were never that close, but now I'm remembering that same day we were pretty up close with them. I was in a building, and then I just remember one of my other squads um, was in the building next to me, and they start getting into contact, and then a grenade goes off, and my team leader told me to just stay there to hold security, and they did what they were doing, and then that kind of broke off, and so we kept moving, and then I think we made it. It had to have been like a couple thousand meters that day. um and it was the first day. The
Yeah.
other companies hadn't been able to do anything, so it was a pretty good precedence to set on day one that we weren't messing
Yeah.
around.
So you pushed out a couple clicks and
Yeah.
then ultimately hung out, um, and then so stayed out for the night, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we set up a little.
How was that?
So we had interpreters with us, so we kind of had to set up camp with some of the natives, and they
Did you
decided
have
to
did you
go
have
ahead.
any of the ANA, the Afghan National Army? Did you have any of them with you at this point?
I don't think so. I don't think we had them for a while.
Okay.
Not that I remember anyway.
Yeah.
It was we just had a couple of interpreters, and those changed quite a bit too. Um, so yeah, we set up security. This was all just kind of just to get the lay of the land, and then the next day we set off one of those, oh, what are they called, like the A pops, like they're like the strings of grenades. Do you know what I'm talking
Hmm.
about? Where you shoot them and then they just go off. It's like a bunch. It's like eight or so grenades set in
I
a
don't
line,
know.
they all go off at once.
No, we didn't have that.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we set off that as a kind of like good morning, and then we just walked back to base. Not we didn't get into contact at all that next day.
Yeah. And then what platoon were you in?
I was in first platoon.
First platoon. Um, so in the book, um, I don't know. I don't. This wasn't just third platoon, but it was 3-5 in general.
Yeah,
They talked about the casualties
yeah,
that were sustained um, within um, within the first 24 hours. Within the first day, you guys had 5 KIAs.
yeah,
Um, just, I mean, it's crazy to think about, man. As you know, I think at a point in time we were just talking about the mindset of going, and people are like, "Hey, man, like, might not come back, or that person
yeah.
beside you may not be here when we come back." And I think there's a certain point of that that's like, yeah, man, that's a bunch of bullshit. Like, whatever, dude.
Right.
Like, look,
It's just
dude,
something they say.
we're Marines, you know. Yeah, like you're just
Yeah,
saying this, you know, whatever. And then here you are, you're literally 24 hours in,
yeah,
you're in this area. You make contact immediately,
mhm,
and then within the battalion, within your unit, 5 guys are already down.
yeah,
Um, and then, dude, it goes from there.
yeah,
So kind of as things went on, that was the first day. And then what was the overall mindset of the unit? What was the strategic plan, so to speak? It sounded like day one was a show of force.
yeah,
We're here. We're not effing around with you guys. Like, we're not the Brits. We're gonna be here. We will own this land.
yeah,
Uh, we will stand at the end of the firefight on your terrain and own it. And that was the mindset then going forward each day.
yep.
So what would each day look like then? Patrols would what was it? Was it just patrolling into areas? Whether it's talking to the locals, the farmers,
Mhm,
whatever, setting
mhm.
up in homes. How would you show force?
So yeah, we do all that. We started a rotation where one squad would go and patrol, and then one squad would stay and rest, and one squad would be on like the fire watch, the guard
Yeah.
duty.
Yep.
And we would go out and make ourselves known to the locals, kind of get a lay of the land where all the Taliban were held up, um, and where all their IEDs are, because our goal was to clear that area out and make it safe for the locals, and cut their supply of opium off. And so I think maybe once a month we'd do a big op with the whole platoon, or maybe even other platoons with us. But yeah, it was just little patrols here and there to take the fight to them and see what happens. Sometimes we would just literally go out just to get into contact, just to get
Yeah.
into the fight.
So in the book, that's the guy, the author, he talks about like the PAQ.
Yeah,
Yeah. He basically said like that was a known area.
yeah,
And if you wanted to get into a fight,
yeah,
you went to that area.
yeah,
Was pretty much the deal. If you wanted to get in and mix it up, that's where you went.
yeah.
Um, and so let me ask you, um, the locals there, the farmers,
Mhm.
how helpful were they? Like in helping you?
Yeah.
And then also, do you think that they knew where the IEDs were? Um, because that's really kind of how it was in Iraq. The locals would know exactly where they were. there would be no locals around when they were command detonated. And so was that your experience as well, where you basically the farmers, because they're not walking livestock,
Right.
um, it's almost like you get a feeling of like if you can find some fresh hoof tracks, you just stay on those.
Yeah, they're safe.
Right.
Yeah.
So what would you think? How helpful were the locals?
They weren't. They weren't
Yeah.
very helpful at all when we first got there. I think it wasn't until the first part of 2011 that they started being helpful and like, oh yeah, there's a weapons cache over here. Oh, 3 IEDs over there. There's some Taliban over here, but at first
Now,
they'll close the door to us.
yeah. And so if you look at um kind of the fatalities of that you guys sustained in that conflict, they are heavily biased towards the beginning of the deployment.
Yeah.
Um, and I wondered too when I saw that, how much of that has to do with the greenness of the battalion. Like, you get a bunch of new guys. How much of it has to do with that versus the time of year? And so you have like the fighting season, and then you get into the winter or the raining season over there, because that the way that they had their IED set up, like that, they can't effectively employ the IED at that point as if it's pouring down rain.
Right.
And so I wondered that, because the casualties kind of did drop off as the deployment went on. I wonder then too, because I think like they talked about, you had Petraeus, and the folks in the Pentagon talking about how effective the counterinsurgency policy was,
Mhm.
when in fact it just was a change in season, and the Taliban, it seemed like maybe just moved out of that area for the
Yeah.
time being.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you guys noticed too? Like the firefights kind of started to calm down. You weren't really getting in as the deployment went on. The engagements, instead of being like daily to multiple times a day, they just
Yeah.
started to, like, you're not getting in firefights maybe a couple times a week.
Right. Well, yeah. I think it's a little bit of that, but I know because when we it was like that, like it was very top heavy on the
Mm-hmm.
firefights and then it tapered off. But I remember talking to the unit that replaced us, 1-5, a couple guys after they got back, and during that same season, it wasn't nearly as bad
Yeah.
as when we were there.
Yeah. I
So
I think with that, man, we can get into the casualties and
yeah.
what you guys sustain. Dude, it's it's unfathomable.
Yeah.
um I was telling Kyle and Johnny, dude, I thought Fallujah was bad. um Dude, what 3-5 went through, dude, unbelievable, man. I mean, and you know it's not just it's not the KIAs, it's the wounded
Yeah.
and the amputees and the traumatic and the trauma that you get out of the wounded guys that stay alive. um and dude, it's tough, man. I mean,
Yeah.
dude, you're literally just tourniquet, 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 and just going in the midst of a firefight.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah. It's just kind of crazy, man.
Yeah.
Um, but so as you guys went on, basically things started to calm down a little bit,
Mhm.
and then you said what, January-ish is when the locals kind of started to um, not necessarily befriend you, but basically like, hey, there's a cache over here,
Yeah.
or hey, just be careful. There's some IEDs. Um, and then just out of curiosity, did they want paid for this information too? They always wanted some dollars.
I'm sure they did. I was never really privy to the conversations, but yeah, they were always asking for money.
Yeah,
They
they're
would
they
come to
always
our
they
base
always
and
they
ask
always
for it.
want some compensation.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we had I remember the owner of the fob that we had, fob increment, would come like once a month and ask for money for the house that we were staying in or the place we were staying in. It was
Yeah. Um, One of the things I wanted to ask you, um, because it seemed like I think in talking with some guys that I knew in Afghanistan, they uh they started to use IEDs almost the way that we use claymores. And I don't know if it was like this for you with how they were using IEDs and Sangin, but what they would do is they would literally set up an ambush and then they would basically center around where the IED was at
Mhm.
once that IED went off. And then that was to stun the Marines, and then it was a full-on firefight from there.
Yep.
Is that you guys ran into a similar type of a deal?
Yeah. I remember one time um we had hit an IED and it was a different squad than mine. And so we set up security while they got the wounded out. And then all of a sudden it just all hell breaks loose, like comes from every direction. RPGs, machine gun fire. And so we had to get the guy out of there pretty fast and maneuver over into a creek bed, and we kind of set up shop there. And we got out of the ambush, and they were still shooting at us pretty bad. And then I just remember all my buddies were down, and the one thing that would happen is like when a machine gun would open up,
Yeah.
the fire would stop. And so I was getting used to that. So I was like, well, I need to get this to stop. So all my buddies were down, and so I get up onto the creek bed right next to a tree, and I just start laying down. And then the incoming fire starts getting closer to me, to where like pieces of bark off the tree were hitting me and sand was hitting me in the face, and it wasn't stopping. So I just like put my head down and just pulled the trigger and kept it going, and then it finally stopped. And
What did you have? Was it a 240?
yeah, 240 Bravo.
Yeah. And what would you guys patrol with, like machine gunners wise? Is that what it would be?
Yep.
240s?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, a 240 is that's that's a good thing to have
Yeah. I
on
felt so
a
safe.
patrol like that. I mean, it just has a little bit more ass behind it than what a saw does.
Yeah, it does.
Um,
And it doesn't
yeah,
jam as much.
yeah. Um, and so from there, you get pinned down
Mhm.
in the ravine, and then basically the fire stops or slows down. What's kind of the game plan from there?
Get back to the fob.
Yeah. How far out were you?
Oh, shoot. I think we had to have been a couple of 100 meters, maybe even a click out. So it was a long trek home,
Yeah.
but we got our guy
And
out of there.
in Cameron, in that situation, would they fight you as you pulled back, or would
Yeah.
they, if you basically like the firefight at that time stopped, would it stop, or would they see you pulling back and then they start basically pressuring more?
Not really.
Yeah.
They After we broke off, we would go back, and then maybe like one or two pop shots, or maybe we'd get into a full-on firefight, but it wasn't every time that they would pursue
Yeah.
us.
You know, I think the one thing that I've taken away from the GWAT in general and fighting a lesser enemy, so to speak, tactically
Yeah,
lesser, financially backed lesser, is they fought the war that they thought that they could win.
yeah,
Um, I think you see that in the tactics that have been employed. You still see it. You see it even like modern day wise, but they're really strategic on the battlefield.
yeah,
Um, they very rarely will engage you directly if you have a superior force.
mhm,
So whether that be, you know, like you have vehicles, you have heavy gun support, things like that. And you know, and that's really where the IEDs come in. I mean, what what was the mindset in the, you know, that kind of first couple days in October where that the first patrol was taking place? What was the mindset going into subsequent patrols when you literally are just getting blown up? Like day in and day out, it's like just hit another IED. It's like,
yeah.
man, these IEDs, you know, what was the mindset of the guys?
It was pretty beaten down, but we were able to kind of keep our spirits up, laughing and joking. But I do remember one incident. It was after our first mass casualty that my platoon had, and I think it was, yeah, it was two of our squads were out. I don't even remember what we were doing, but we got into heavy contact, and we started heading back, and we were almost into the fob, and they saw the guys that were shooting at us, and
Yeah.
so second squad went to chase them, and we were always told not to chase
Yep.
because they would lead us into an IED, and sure as shit, they let them right into an IED, and we were like making our way back into the patrol base, and so then we came back out to help them out, and they hit another IED, and we lost two guys, and then um, two or three other guys got injured that day. One of our corpsmen lost both of his legs.
Yeah.
Uh, and then we got back into the patrol base, and my sergeant just throws his helmet down and starts going crazy. And when I saw that, I broke down,
Yeah.
because your sergeant is your rock, and when he starts losing it, it's hard to keep it together. But for the most part, our leadership was good about keeping our spirits up. I mean, our gunnery sergeant, he was the most motivating person you will ever meet. He could say like two sentences, and I'd want to go out there on my own and take it to him.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
was,
Um, yeah, man. I mean, I think that was the one of the toughest things in from the mid 2000s kind of onward. I don't ever remember feeling threatened for my life getting in a firefight.
no,
Never, I always felt the guys I was with, I felt like going toe to toe. Felt like we were a superior fighting force. I felt
100%.
that. And I think a lot of guys really feel that way. Like whether you're going into a house and there's a lot of uncertainties going into a house, going
Yeah,
on a patrol, whatever, making contact. I feel like the way that we were trained and we were a better fighting force. But where the battlefield was leveled was the freaking IEDs, man.
yeah,
Um, it got so bad during the Fallujah deal that we basically stopped driving during the day.
Yeah.
Um, and we only would drive at night. And it's just because the IED threat was that bad.
Yeah.
Um, and that was the thing, man. I mean, it was literally like you're driving down the road and you're like, dude, is this going to be the day? Is this
Yeah.
going to be the day that my vehicle's hit, you know? And it just it wears on you, man.
It does.
Because, you know, it doesn't seem fair, but at the same time, I'm sure that what they think doesn't seem fair to them, what the capabilities that we have, you know, like we
Right.
have air assets.
Right.
You know, we have armored Humvees, you know, we have heavy guns, whatever the case may be. And so that is their way of leveling the battlefield and basically getting us on the same playing field.
Yeah.
Man, yeah, it definitely the IEDs was bad. And yeah, I think the hard part about it is that the IED threat and the damage that the IEDs incurred, um, it didn't stop in country.
Mm-mm.
We have a lot of guys that had some pretty significant injuries, and they end up not making it through, and it wasn't necessarily because of the injuries. It's
Yeah.
because they just got tired of dealing with things. Um, and you know, we're talking about guys that go through 15, 20, 30 surgeries. And it's like, dude, what is the point anymore? I don't want
Yeah.
to deal with this. I don't want to live this life anymore. And that's the problem that it's a major problem that we're dealing with now. We're losing guys literally from those two conflicts.
Yeah.
It's tough, man.
From our
Um,
deployment, even we've had 5 or 6 now that have
yeah.
that have done that.
It's definitely not a good thing. I don't know what the solution is. I know there's a lot of good groups out there trying to do the best that they can. I hope the numbers are changing. But you know, it's going with that thought, man. Tell me how it was. I have a feeling I knew how it was, but when you got back, what was it like? You know, so you get back, you have a feeling, right? You cheated death.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, it's crazy because you're like, dude, we just literally I survived and I had 25 guys that was in my unit. Like we had the most dead in our unit and here I am. So you have this feeling of invincibility. Um, I think, and then what do Marines do? What are the what did those Marines do? Like first night back, what are you doing?
We go crazy.
You go freaking nuts, man. Uh,
They were
dude, it's
smart. They didn't let us off base.
you know, and it's crazy because I think like you look at it and you can go like one or two ways, right? So you say you got a bunch of like young 20-some-year-old males, haven't really seen a female in 7 months. You also say you got a bunch of young 20-some-year-old males who haven't really drank
Yeah.
that like love to drink and they haven't drank in 7 months or should not have been drinking in
Right.
7 months, we'll say. And it's like, what am I gonna do? And what do those Marines choose to do?
Drink.
They're freaking drinking, man. And dude, and I think that it's somewhat of a challenge because like it's a party for sure. Like, dude, I made it back, you know. It's a party of remembering the people that didn't make it back.
Yeah.
But where it starts to kind of get maybe a little out of control is when the alcohol starts to become the medicine for these guys.
Yeah.
And the the party doesn't end, or it's no longer I should say a better phrase would be it's no longer a party.
Yeah.
It's just what we do.
Yeah.
Um, and you just start kind of going down that path. Um, but it was crazy, man. I mean, dude, I remember. So how long did you say they wouldn't let you off the base?
It felt like 2 months, but I don't think it was that long.
Yeah, we had when we got back, we had a 96 like right away, I think, from what I remember. So we had a 96 before everyone went on like post-deployment leave. And I remember, dude, like the Marine Corps is like, I'm sure other branches do the same thing, but the Marine Corps is like famous about safety briefs.
Yeah.
And so dude, I mean, I remember the safety brief was like, yeah, you just made it back from Iraq. Like you made it. Don't do anything stupid. Um, basically, if you drink, don't drive. If you tap it, wrap it. This sort of like safety brief deal, right? So, you know, I think everybody that I was with was pretty tame, like nothing happened. And then we come back on, after the 96, and our first sergeant's like, well, guys, he's like, I just want to tell you, like, thank you. You guys behaved, you did what you're supposed to. He's like, H&S, not so much. He goes, and everyone's like, what's going on? Because they were in a separate barracks at the time.
Yeah.
He goes, yeah, some fucker from H&S, like they called Domino's and had Domino's delivered, and then somebody from H&S stole the Domino's pizza guy's car
Oh
and starts
my
doing donuts in the parking lot. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, you've got to be shitting me. Like, I mean, absolutely freaking nuts. But
Jesus.
that was the thing, man. It's like, dude, you
You
come
gotta do it
back and
big.
it's literally like you just kind of cheated death.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a very, very weird sensation
Surreal.
to have. But one of the things that I want to ask you is, well, let's just, I want to, for everyone who's still listening, I want to kind of go through your deployment in like timeline wise of casualties and KIAs. Because dude, it is truly staggering.
Yeah.
So I think we already said, like, within the first day, man, that first patrol, there's 5 KIAs. Literally within one day, 5 guys are gone. Within the 48 hours, so 24 hours after that,
Yeah.
you're at 8 KIAs already.
Yeah.
24 wounded. Um, within 10 days, you have a platoon commander goes down and the corpsman goes down as well. And I
Yeah.
don't know if that was the corpsman you referenced, because in the book they talked about it being, I don't know if it was a double amputee. It very well could have been, but that was at the very front end of the deployment.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and then within that first month, 15 KIAs,
Yeah.
40 amputees. That just goes, that's straight up the IEDs.
Yeah.
Just absolutely crazy. And then within 2 months, you guys sustain 20 KIAs. Just nuts, man. And that's what I said, like, when I was listening, or when I was reading the book, the it seemed like things were very heavy on the front end. I mean, 25 guys ended up dying out of 3-5,
Yeah.
but it's within the first 2 months, it was 20.
Yeah.
And so, and here's the crazy thing too, is I'm sure like some people listening remember General Kelly, Marine Corps general, lost his son. His son was one of the platoon commanders that was killed in 3-5, Lieutenant
Second
Robert Kelly.
platoon. Second
Yeah,
platoon in my company.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's the, man, it's very rare that you see or you hear of an officer dying.
Yeah.
It certainly does happen. It just doesn't happen that often, largely just numbers wise. And then secondly, they're not necessarily like in the action, so to speak. And
Yeah.
so it's a pretty big deal. I would say in the hierarchy of command, the only thing more, a bigger loss, so to speak, to a platoon would be a platoon sergeant. The platoon sergeant is the guy who runs the platoon,
Yeah.
and he's really like the father figure, so to speak, of the platoon. And so, dude, just crazy. But then, um, the at the end of the deployment, like I said, 25 Marines. We certainly, I would consider, Farrell Gillum, was, I would say he's a 26 Marine that was killed over there.
Yeah.
Um, he, the backstory on him was, guy wanted to be a Marine basically his whole life. That's all he wanted to do, pretty much like you and I.
Mhm.
As soon as he can enlist, he enlists, um, and becomes a double amputee, I want to say, over there, has numerous infections, that he tries to fight through, over the 3 to 4 years following, his injury in 2011. And then he went through, I want to say, 30 surgeries and ended up taking his life. So it's just, it's hard, with that. And then, I believe, the numbers out of the book were, 184, wounded, and that is literally, that's just at the end of the deployment for you guys, for 3-5. And then they threw in from basically that 2010 to 2012. So extend that out. Who'd you say replaced you? 1-5?
Yeah. 1-5.
Yeah, so 1-5 when they came in, and you look at their casualties, and then factor in ultimately probably 3-7 a little bit as well. Total of 50 KIAs, that those units sustained, and roughly a half a battalion became amputees, out of that. So it's staggering, man. Like, dude, what you have lived through, and what you've experienced, it's crazy, man. And you were what, 19?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think I
19.
turned 19 in Afghanistan. No, I turned 20 in Afghanistan. Yeah.
Dude, it's crazy, man. And I think, kind of not necessarily wrapping everything up, but, you take a look at what our country expects of young men in that position, right? Um, because that's one of the things that the Marine Corps teaches is, you always know the job of the guy above you.
Yeah.
And so here you are, you're 19-year-old slash 20-year-old, and you're seeing the carnage and the savagery,
Yeah.
all around you. And it's, you have to be able to make decisions, and they're split-second decisions. You know, um, I had a guy, he was a CEO of a company, and he found out I was in the military and whatnot. Just got to talking, and, he said, "Dude," he's like, "if you ever need a job, let me know." He's like, "I hire military people." I'm like, "Oh yeah," and he goes, "Yeah, dude." He goes, I love military guys." He goes, I can get a PhD from Georgia Tech, and I come to him with a problem that I need solved, and he just sits there and pontificates on it in like some academic manner. He goes, military guys, they see the problem and they come up with solutions on how to address the problem.
Yeah.
Um, and it really goes to kind of the stuff that, you live through.
Yeah.
Because it's like you said, you're sitting there, and the platoon commander is, you're getting shot at, And the guy's like, shoot, start returning fire. What are we waiting on? Like, it's like, no shit. Like, dude, you were taught this, right? But it's that, and then he's just making those split-second decisions. Especially like, dude, the IEDs, man, when you see someone close physically, not necessarily emotionally close to you, but like physically close to you, they're bleeding out.
Yeah.
You have to make a decision. What do I do? And go from there. Cameron, what I would ask you next is, given what you lived through and what I was just saying about how I think a lot of times we may pack some of that stuff away,
Yeah.
but how would you say that you used some of the traits that you learned, whether it just be the Marine Corps in general, the stuff you learned in Sangin? What would you say? I mean, do you pull from that at all with what you do now?
Yeah.
Do
All
you,
the
do you
time.
draw from that?
Yeah. It's mainly the perspective of what I may be going through in PT school relative to what I've been through in Afghanistan or in the
Yeah,
Marines. Um, Nothing's as bad as that, So
right. It isn't it crazy? Because I mean, I think obviously like people would the people who look at this superficially and be like, well, yeah, Cameron, no shit, it's not the same. I mean, like, dude, like your classmate, when you go to the ICU, it's literally just a simulation lab, Cameron. It's not
yeah,
real. Like, but it's not that, right?
right.
It's literally how you create a perspective around the situation.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, let me ask you this. Do you feel that you hold yourself to a different standard than the people around you? Not necessarily, I'm not saying that you look down on other people. What I'm saying is, do you think that when people find out that you're a Marine, that they expect more of you?
I do. Yeah.
It's a very weird thing,
Yeah.
and I feel some of that too, and I don't necessarily know if it's because the people that I interact with now, either if they hold me to a higher standard, um, or I think they do, or I look at it from the perspective of the people behind me that I have that I work with in the military, and I look at I'm a representation of the Marine Corps. So when people see me,
Yeah.
they see the Marine Corps, or they see the units that I worked with or what I did. Like that's the representation, and I'm like, I don't want to fuck that up.
Yeah.
Like I just it's crazy. Like I just look at that as something where when I talk to people about the military, um, I always tell them, if it wasn't for the Marine Corps, I wouldn't be where I am right now.
No, not at all.
And I know that.
Yeah.
I can say that with 100% confidence. You feel the same way,
Yeah. I don't think I would have ever been able to go to a doctorate program and do as well as I am now.
right?
I
You
wasn't
know, right. I mean, and I always tell people, dude, we do more than eat crayons.
a
People just think that Marines are.
Everybody uses that.
Yeah, people are out there just thinking we eat Crayola crayons, and I'm like, dude, look at this. Yeah, man. But um, Cameron, what I'll say, man, is um, do you have? Would you like to say anything else um, to speak about Memorial Day, the significance of Memorial Day? Um, anything at all, anything about the guys that you worked with, you served with, and the guys you lost, anything?
Um, I do kind of want to make a shout out to my buddy, Lance Corporal Colton Rusk. He was the one guy that I lost that was closest to me. I knew him from SOI on. He wasn't in my company, but he was still in my battalion. Um, and he he was a bomb dog handler, and he passed away on a patrol. He was in weapons company, so he was in vehicles, and they hit an IED, and him being a bomb dog handler, he was the first one out, and it was an IED ambush. And then he got shot almost immediately after he got out of the truck. Um, but after the deployment, his his parents got to adopt his dog, which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
And he's who I remember every Memorial Day. He's who I think of, and of course the rest of them. But he's the one that I wear on my wrist,
yeah,
and so I just wanted to make a mention of him. And that's what this
absolutely,
day is
man.
about: is remembering those we've lost. And for anyone else out there that's listening, I just want you to let you know that it is okay to talk and reach out if you need to.
Yeah, yeah, man. I think that's the hard thing for veterans to do. And I'll speak as just around like the GWAT and whatnot. Um, there's a feeling out there that people just don't understand. Um, and part of that might be true.
Yeah,
But I'll say this too, give people the benefit of the doubt to listen to you.
yeah,
Don't just assume that people don't care, that they don't want to listen. Um, that could be the case, but I think what you'll find is people truly do care.
yeah,
We have there's a very good group that would they'll listen to you,
yeah,
and you can talk, and I think sometimes that's one of the best things that we can do is literally just talk.
yeah,
Um, you can't. I think with that being said, you can't bottle up what you experienced, and and for veterans that maybe listen to this, the reason why I don't think you should do that or you can't do that is because you're doing a disservice to the people that you lost.
yes,
Because if you don't tell their story, and if you don't keep their story alive, they will die. No
yeah,
one will know the sacrifices that are made. So just think about it in the context of that. What Memorial Day is about, it is about remembering the people that have paid the ultimate sacrifice to this country. And that's what I would say. Keep their stories alive, tell their stories. And it doesn't have to be anything necessary gory. It doesn't have to be anything that you don't want to talk about. But I will tell you that there's a lot of funny stories too, like
yeah,
I think like when you can tell good stories, and dude, people think stories in the military, a lot of times they can't even believe them, like the shit that goes on.
yeah,
But it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to look at it from this really kind of sadness type of a thing.
right,
Um, Tell their story, tell it in a joyous way.
yeah,
We talk about sacrificing ourselves, and sacrificing for the country. But tell that story to those people. Let them know like what the sacrifice was about.
and it can be therapeutic.
I completely agree, man. Um, I think it's one of the best things that we can do. The other thing that I would say too is never hesitate to reach out to people that you serve with. Like, believe me, man, I think, and and I guess I should say it doesn't even have to be like people you directly serve with. But you get a bunch of veterans together, dude, it's a good time, man.
Yeah.
Like it's dude, it's pretty funny, man, the stories
Oh yeah.
that come up and can be discussed. Um, but I think you're right, man. I think reaching out, talking to people, tell their stories, man. That's the best thing that you can do. If you want to honor that person's life, tell their story.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, Cameron, I really appreciate you coming on, you telling me your story and telling the folks your story. I got to be honest with you, man. I really wasn't necessarily I did not know the full depth of what 3-5 sustained over in Afghanistan. Just I mean, it's pretty unprecedented, the losses that you guys sustained. Like I said, I mean, Fallujah is considered the bloodiest battle of the Iraq War, but man, oh day, I don't think a unit sustained near those losses in that time span
Yeah.
than what 3-5 sustained in Afghanistan and Sangin. Um, just it's pretty unprecedented.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, but thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, man.
It's been wonderful.
You let me know if you need anything in the future.
I
Um,
will.
we'll do it.
Thank you.
All right, buddy.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. Thanks for listening to that interview that Zac just did with Cameron. It was maybe a little long, but I think it was really impactful. And then talking to Cameron afterward, he said it was really, really impactful for him. So hope that hearing people talk about their experiences, at least, if you're having a tough time, it helps you know that there's other people out there that have had a tough time that have gone through something similar, and man, find a way to talk to them if you can. So one of the things that was real important to all of us to do at the end of this podcast was to memorialize the 25 service members, 26, excuse me, service members that ultimately died in Afghanistan as part of the 3-5 or subsequently ended their life due to injuries sustained there. So I'm going to do that now, and then we will finish the podcast with playing the taps. The fallen of the 3-5. October 8, 2010, Lance Corporal John Sparks. October 13th, 2010, Lance Corporal Joseph Rodewald, Lance Corporal Philip Vintage, Corporal Justin Kane, and Private First Class Victor Dew. October 14th, 2010, Lance Corporal Alec Catherwood, Lance Corporal Irvin Siniceros, and Lance Corporal Joseph Lopez. October 15th, 2010, Lance Corporal James Bulk. October 16, 2010, Sergeant Ian Tawney. November 4, 2010, Lance Corporal Matthew Brome and Lance Corporal Brandon Pearson. November 6, 2010, Lance Corporal Randy Braggs. November 9th, 2010, First Lieutenant Robert Kelly. November 10th, 2010, Lance Corporal James Stack. November 24th, 2010, Lance Corporal Arden Buenaga. November 25th, 2010, First Lieutenant William Donnelly. December 2nd, 2010, Sergeant Matthew Abate. December 6th, 2010, Corporal Derek Wyatt, and Private First Class Colton Rusk. December 7th, 2010, Sergeant Jason Petto. December 17th, 2010, Lance Corporal Jose Maldonado. December 24th, 2010, Lance Corporal Kenneth Corzine. December 28th, 2010, Corporal Tevin Wynn. January 20th, 2011, Sergeant Jason Amores. And then January 9th, 2014, Farrell Gillum. His rank was Corporal Farrell Gillum.